you may be around the world, and thank you for joining us once again on truth2u.org. That's truth, the number 2, letter U.org. It's Season 2 of Torah Pearls. I'm Jono, and joining me in the virtual Truth2U studio, all the way from Ireland, is Jason of Spiritualbabies.net. G'day, mate.
Good evening. It's like, I think this is like 11:30 for me here. It's dark and cold. And there's a little bit of extra room on the seat next to me where there normally isn't.
What does that mean?
Because it's just you and I in the studio. There's no...
Oh, there's no Tobia.
Yeah.
There's no Tobia, there's no Ross. We can do what we want. Look at all this equipment we have to play with.
I've already started throwing stuff around.
I've already made a paper aeroplane. There's no one to hold us back. So, but having said that, this is a really short Torah portion, and I think that you and I can set a record for the shortest Torah portion ever.
And if there is a record to be broken, I would much prefer it to be the shortest one than the longest one.
Yeah. For long-term listeners, I know that I think we broke the 3-hour mark in the first season with Keith and Nehemiah. Oh, did we? It was close. It was close. But this one, looking at this, I think we've got about 2.5 chapters. It's incredibly short, and there's an incredible amount of repetition. Not only is there repetition, but there's a lot of detail that's just kind of, there's the hooks and the loops and the loops and the hooks and the gold and the purple and the blue and the hooks and the woven and those ones. And I just read half the Torah portion just then. So we're going to try.
It's like one of those when you go to IKEA and you get a flat pack for a shelving unit. This is the instruction for the flat pack for the shelving unit.
Yeah, that's what it is. So this is Pekudei, and it begins in Exodus chapter 38, verse 21. It goes all the way to the end of the book of Exodus. Do you know, by the time we finish this, which will be in about 5 minutes, we will have finished the book of Exodus. And
awesome,
next week we'll be on to Leviticus. It's incredible.
Yeah, and that's one of my favorite. Leviticus and Deuteronomy. That's two. Yeah. Looking forward to that.
Okay, so it begins like this, Mr. Spiritual Babies. Material for the tabernacle. It says, this is the inventory of the tabernacle of the testimony, which was counted according to the commandment of Moses for the service of the Levites by the hand of Itamar, the son of Aaron the priest. Of course, it goes on to talk about Bezalel, who Tobia was talking about I was going to say last week, but it's a double Torah portion.
Yeah,
this week.
This morning, technically.
It was, it was last night for me, but it was this morning for you. And everyone's going, what are you talking about? Stop confusing me. But yes, there's time and space.
We heard a lot about Bezalel in the previous Torah portion, and Tovia explained what his name meant. And he also spoke about the other kind of principal artisan guy, Holiab, I think is pronounced as. But what's pretty neat though is that while Bezalel was from the tribe of Judah, the other guy was from the tribe of Dan, and Dan's kind of considered the smallest of the tribes often. I find it kind of neat that one of the guys was from if you like, the biggest and greatest of the tribes, and one of them was the smallest, but they still had an equal role in creating all this amazing, wonderful stuff. And it just shows the kind of equality that was in Israel. And I find that really endearing, that it's not just about one major group leading everyone forward. Everyone gets a fair crack at the whip when it comes to giving their talents towards the people and the greater good. I thought that was pretty cool.
I'll tell you what I really like about that is that it filled in about 2 minutes.
And thanks for listening.
All right. No, that's really good. And by the way, we're going to Dan, of course, when we go to Israel this November, the Tanakh tour, and there are still seats available, and people can join Mr. Spiritual Babies and myself and Tovia Singer and Ross Nichols of Roots of Faith. We're all going to be going to Israel and doing a tour, but Dan is one of the places that we are definitely going to, and we're going to go and check out that the altar in Dan that should never have been there.
We'll dig there, right?
There's an archaeological excavation there, and it's a fascinating place up by where the Jordan gushes with crystal clear water. I can't wait. It's one of my favorite places.
The Danites are supposed to have been seafaring people. There's a whole thing about that and their relationship with Greece. There's a lot of cool stuff. I think actually at the beginning of Simca's TV show, The Naked Archaeologist, he always kind of famously goes for this doorway, and I think that is the doorway at Dan.
Oh, truly. There you go. So, chapter 39, the making of the garments of the priesthood, the blue, the purple, the scarlet thread. They made garments for of ministry for the ministering in the holy place. They made the holy garments for Aaron as the Lord had commanded Moses. Next is the ephod. We spoke about that earlier on as well.
In chapter 39, it only mentions the wool, and it doesn't mention linen. So we have to conclude that that's then not the garments for the high priest that we read about earlier on.
Well, see, I'm still now, okay, so what you're referring to is the conversation that we last had with Tovia. It's also the conversation that we had with Ross, that I had with Ross, actually, in regards to what was the garments made of for the high priest. Yeah. Now, Tovia says that the holy material was shatnez, which is the combination of wool and linen. Right. That's something I didn't know, and I was really surprised about. What you're pointing out is that doesn't seem to be appearing here, at least in this verse here, chapter 39, verse 1.
In chapter 39, it mentions the blue, purple, and crimson wool. They made the meshwork garments to serve the Lord, but it doesn't mention any linen.
Do you know it doesn't actually say wool, though? I've got, now some translations will say blue, purple, and scarlet yarn. I've got blue, purple, and scarlet thread. But in fact, yarn, thread, wool, none of those are in the text. I know somewhere, in fact, in the last Torah portion that we did, it makes reference to the women that were weaving goat's hair.
That's right.
As opposed to wool. It's goat's hair. But then does that mean that it's okay to combine goat's hair with linen? It's just one of those really curious things that I do find particularly of interest. Anyhow, the making of the ephod. We've got the onyx stones that go on the shoulders. We've got the fine linen, the gold, the memorial stones. The making of the breastplate, of course, with all the different stones that represent each individual tribe of Israel. We read about that in great detail, the braided chains of gold and so on and so forth. Anything you want to highlight there?
When I was looking at the Uman and the Tumen, or Thumen, depending on how you pronounce it, I went looking for information. I mean, I always assumed that they were two parts of that breastplate, that maybe the two onyx shoulder pads with that. You know, one of them was Uman and the other was a Thumen. But that doesn't seem to be the case. It's kind of, you kind of get the impression that this chest plate, for want of a better example, was like a light show, and that all these stones had a purpose, and that they lit up in some mysterious way. But that's
one of the theories. That is one of the theories, yeah. But we don't know much about that. We really don't. There's not that much information.
There's no example of it in the process of kind of being used. We only know that it was used, but we don't know how. I mean, it's a mystery, literally.
Yeah, it literally is. Well, we'll just have to wait and see, I suppose. Verse 22, he made the robe of the ephod of woven work, all of blue, and there was an opening in the middle of the robe, like the opening of a coat of mail.
Someone asked, actually, in one of the forums on Facebook, I think it was the Torah-Babies forum, they asked, what does that mean, like a coat of mail? So in one of my translations, I've got a coat of armor, and another one that says a coat of mail. And it's kind of, what was interesting to me is I didn't realize they had that kind of technology back then.
Like chainmail, right?
Like chainmail, yeah. It's thousands of tiny little rings, and they're all they've all got a little cut in them, and then you bend them slightly, and you loop it into the next ring, and you bend it back, and eventually you end up with this sheet. But the point of this is, at the edge of those sheets, there'd be slightly bigger rings, which caused kind of a barrier against them rubbing off anything you were wearing. And so when it says they made a bottom hem of the robe, or a hem that was like the edge of a coat of armor, it would have meant that they ran some extra material around the edge of the garment to stop it fraying. And that's what that reference is. It says it was turned inwards like the opening of a coat of armor. It's talking about that material turned back a little bit, and then a running kind of stitches, like zigzagging or weaving, it's coiling its way is probably a better word, around the edges to stop it being, it says right there, like, to stop it being torn.
Yeah, that's what it says, so that it would not tear.
Yeah, and even today, when you buy a shirt, you don't just get the hem, do you? The hem's folded back and then it's stitched in place so it doesn't fray.
Okay, well, I can visualize that now. That's great. Thank you. They made on the hem of the robe pomegranates of blue, purple, scarlet, and the fine woven linen They made the bells pure of gold, and they put the bells between the pomegranates on the hem of the robe. These, of course, are the bells that they had to wear so that he would not die, as it says earlier on. Very, very important. And they've got the tunics, artistically woven, fine linen. Aaron and his sons, a turban, fine
you know what
linen,
I've got there
linen.
on 28? It says, and the glorious high hats of linen. So they weren't just turbans, they were big turbans. And I think if you're going to wear a turban, go big.
Go big. I've got exquisite hats of fine linen. You've got what? Glorious high hats?
Glorious high hats. And that's literally what the Hebrew means, glorious high hats. I figure,
nice.
Yeah, I think when we're in Israel, we should definitely, at least for a day,
some of those.
Rock the turban.
Okay, and a sash of fine woven linen, blue, purple, and scarlet thread, made by a weaver as the Lord had commanded Moses. They made the holy plate, crown of gold, and wrote on it an inscription like the engraving of a signet, holiness to the Lord.
And inscribed on it the inscription like the engravings of a seal. And I think what that means is that it would project outwards. So when we think about inscribing something, normally you're writing into the metal. But when it says like the engravings of a seal almost always comes out of the thing, so you can push it into the wax or whatever else.
How would they have done that, by the way?
You would have done it one of two ways. You'd have had quite thin metal, and it's in modern talk, it's called a pig, unfortunately. It's basically a bag full of sand, and you put the metal down on this bag of sand, and you hit it with the chisel from the back really gently.
To push it out.
And push it out. Then you turn it over and you push back the bits you don't want out, and then you put it back, and it's like a repeat process of that. Or the other way, the kind of the quicker but the more expensive way would be to literally forge the letters and then weld it onto the plate.
How back then would you weld it onto the plate? I mean, is that a possibility, or do you think it's more likely that they would have pushed it out, protruded the letters out?
I think it's more likely that they hammered the whole thing. Gold is quite soft, so conceivably, if your breastplate was quite thick, you could kind of bash in around the letters for a period of time until they started to make a relief on their own and then turn it over. Gold, it doesn't. But then gold has quite a low melting point, and there are some really exquisite in Greece. There's the National Museum of Archaeology in Greece, and it has some amazing goldware that you wouldn't believe was 3,000 years old. So I think either way would be fair, but in the middle of the desert, I'd go with a hammer. Yeah,
right, okay. So they tied that to a blue cord, fastened it above on the turban as the Lord commanded Moses. I love it. It all ends with as the Lord commanded Moses. And we see that following here to the end of chapter 39, they are completing the work. Everything is put together. And then they call Moses over and they say, come and check it out. So it says, according to all, and this is verse 42, according to all that the Lord had commanded Moses, so the children of Israel did all the work. Then Moses looked over all the work, and indeed they had done it, as the Lord had commanded. Just so they had done it. And Moses blessed them. The thing I find really cool about this is, of course, and we've discussed this before, but there's no blueprints in the Tanakh. There's no pictures, there's no blueprints. And when we go further back, we find out that God showed, like visually showed Moses the design and said, this is how it's to be done. Moses conveyed to those who were working, and we also find out that the two gentlemen that we were talking about before, God put it on in their heart, the ability, the wisdom, the knowledge to be able to do this. And at the end of it all, Moses, who was the one who was shown it in the first place, came and checked it all out and said, guys, beautiful, this is what I was shown, you did it right, thank you very much.
It's like a foreman on a building site, that the architect comes and shows the plans and says, right, it's up to you. The foreman goes off and makes sure that the workman does a good job. But yeah, it is interesting that in that instance, God speaks to Moses and gives him this information that isn't recorded in the text. It's interesting because we kind of just accept that's the truth. I mean, you get to speak to a lot of people doing what we do, and giving people the opportunity to chat and getting involved in conversations. And they come from a lot of religious backgrounds, and some of them, if it's not written in the text, then it wasn't true, or they have additional sources of information that they lean on. But I don't think anywhere are recorded blueprints. Moses was the only person who got to see it, but we all accept it.
Melecha. That's the word for that's used here for work, which is the same term used for God's work of creation in Genesis. That's used a lot in this passage, and it's used again here. Tovia speaks about that in the previous Torah portion. Here we are at chapter 40, and it says that they erected and arranged the tabernacle, and it all fits together like Lego. Well, maybe not like Lego, but they consecrated the altar. Now, here's an interesting thing, Mr. Spiritual Babies, chapter 40, verse 15. You shall anoint them. Now, we're talking about Aaron. Well, let's start from verse 12. It says, you shall bring Aaron and his sons to the door of the tabernacle of meeting and wash them with water. You shall put the holy garments on Aaron and anoint him and consecrate him, that he may minister to me as priest. And you shall bring his sons and clothe them with tunics. You shall anoint them as you anointed their fathers, that they may minister to me as priests. For their anointing shall surely be an everlasting priesthood throughout their generations.
We've been through this before in our Hebrew Roots series.
We have, and of course it's not entirely relevant to the Torah portion, but for those who have come from the background that you and I have come from the Christian tradition, and have left that and refined our faith to the Tanakh, thank God. But of course we were taught that priesthood is no longer relevant. It's become obsolete, and now there's a new priesthood in the order of Melchizedek, and that's Jesus, and so on and so forth. But that's not what it says in the Tanakh. What it says in the Tanakh is that the Aaronic priesthood is an everlasting priesthood throughout your generations. Everlasting priesthood throughout your generations. And we know when we get to books like Ezekiel that talks about the Messianic age, that the priests of Zadok are still in the line of Aaron are still functioning.
And I mean, one argument that I sometimes get when this is brought up is, well, where are they now? But in I want to say Hosea, although some people pronounce it Hosea 3, 4 through 5 and 6, we read very specifically that the people of Israel will go a very long period of time without offerings, without an altar, without priests, without a prince, without a king. But and that, for me, I love that verse, because for one, it says that there is going to be a huge bubble of time where there won't be a priesthood and there won't be offerings, there won't be sacrifices, but they do come back. And so that's very I'm grateful for that verse, because there's a promise there, and there's a prophecy that's being fulfilled right now. I mean, every day we don't have a priesthood, I can read that verse and say, this is prophetic, it's happening right now. The second thing that's kind of cool is that if that's a lie, if that's a lie, then we have an issue with the whole text. And that can only be a lie if there's no need for any further sacrifices, and if there's a different priesthood that comes in. So if Jesus is a new high priest by the order of Melchizedek, and if Jesus is the new sacrifice, then the Hosea verses are lies. And you can't have them both. They don't both work.
You can't blow up the first 3 stories of a building and expect the 2 top stories to stand.
No, absolutely.
So it's just something to throw in. I just love that verse. I just love the way it says, surely be an everlasting priesthood throughout their generations. Everlasting, very good. And of course, and I will throw into the mix, of course, people like Tovia, people like Rabbi Eli Cohen, who can trace their Aaronic family tree all the way back. There are many, many Cohen like that. And so when the question is asked, well, where are they now? There are, believe me, there are Cohens that can trace their family tree all the way back. They know who they are.
Yeah.
All right, where are we up to? Oh, the cloud of glory. Okay, so this little passage here finishes at verse 33, and it says, so Moses finished all the work. They put the tabernacle together, and there it was. And then we have the cloud of glory. The cloud covered the tabernacle. The glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle, and Moses was not able to enter the tabernacle of meeting because the cloud rested above it. And the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Whenever the cloud was taken up from the tabernacle, the children of Israel would go onward in all their journeys. But if the cloud was not taken up, then they did not journey till the day that it was taken up. For the cloud of the Lord was above the tabernacle by day, and the fire was over it by night, in the sight of all the house of Israel throughout all their journeys.
The cloud there, I read some rather interesting things about the cloud. I mean, every year I go through the Torah portion, and I have to refine and reassess what I thought I knew about the Torah portion. And this year, one of the things that's sprung out to me from some of the commentary is that when I read this previously, and I saw the cloud of smoke by day and the cloud of fire by night, I assigned that with a label angel, and two, if a cloud rested in the tent of meeting, I assumed that as a physical, not embodiment, but a picture that God was there. It was like he left his hat on the door stand. But the commentaries I've read have said that the cloud was there to stop the glory of the Lord being seen by those around the tent. There was a kind of a barrier, a shield, and I hadn't read that before this year. I find that kind of interesting because the whole thing is about barriers and shields. I mean, we have this amazing tiny little tent which houses the Holy of Holies and the menorah and the showbread, and I'm thinking, well, why wasn't that enough? Why do we need another wall around that to put the altar in? I mean, it's not like people don't get to see the workings. And then even on top of that, now we've got this cloud that's resting on it, and it's resting on it to cover up the glory of the Lord. It's kind of interesting to me that the curtains and the tent weren't enough. And God is like, nope, we're going to need something else. So this cloud's going to come in here too.
So I've got an interesting note on this, by the way, and this is in my Stones edition of the Tanakh, and it says on this particular verse, the glory of God was so intense that Moses could not enter, but a latter verse in Numbers chapter 7, verse 89, states that he would regularly enter the tent of meeting. The second half of this verse resolves the contradiction. For the cloud rested upon it. Thus, when the cloud rested upon the tabernacle, Moses could not enter. But when the cloud lifted, he could enter to speak with God. This is Rashi.
Yeah, see, we maybe are presupposing that the glory of God is God. And we know from, the patriarchs like Abraham that God can speak to anybody at any time. Mm-hmm. And it could be that Moses couldn't enter it while the glory was there. And he knew that when the cloud wasn't there, then the glory wasn't there, but he could still talk to God. And we have also explanations that the two seraphim on top of the ark, their wings were spread as a shield, so people wouldn't see the glory of God.
True, that's what it says. Well, it ends with it goes on to end with a note from the Ramban, and it says, in the plain meaning of this verse, however, when God wished to speak with Moses, he summoned him, and Moses stood outside the tent of meeting, so that he did not enter the place that was filled with God's glory. So there it is. That's the end of our Torah portion. Is that a record? Are we finished? Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I do. I think we should go to a psalm. I'm actually just going to pull it up.
Go on.
Yeah, Psalm 84. And I think this is really lovely and it'd be a great way to finish it off. I'll just do the first 5. How lovely is your dwelling place? And it says Lord Almighty in this text. My soul yearns, even faints, for the courts of the Lord. My heart and flesh cry out for the living God. Even the sparrow has found a home, and the swallow a nest for herself where she may have her young. A place near your altar, Lord Almighty, the King and my God. Blessed are those who dwell in your house, for they are praising you.
While we're in the Psalms, Psalm chapter 90, a prayer of Moses, the man of God. This is a prayer of Moses in the Psalms. How about that? This is the way that Book 4 of the Psalms begins, which is from Psalm 90 to Psalm 106. And it says, Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. You turn men to destruction and say, return, O children of men. For 1,000 years in your sight are like yesterday when it is past, and like a watch in the night. You carry them away like a flood. They are like sheep. In the morning, they are like grass which grows up. In the morning, it flourishes and grows up. In the evening, it is cut down and withered. For we have been consumed by your anger, and by your wrath we are terrified. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your countenance. For all our days have passed away in your wrath. We finish our years like a sigh. The days of our lives are 70 years, and if by reason of strength they are 80 years, yet their boast is only labor and sorrow, for it is soon cut off, and we fly away. Who knows the power of your anger? For as the fear of you, so is your wrath. So teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Return, O Lord, how long? And have compassion on your servants. O satisfy us early with your mercy, that we may rejoice and be glad all our days. Make us glad according to the days in which you have afflicted us, the years in which we have seen evil. Let the work appear to your servants, and your glory to their children. And let the beauty of the Lord, our God, be upon us, and establish the work of our hands for us. Yes, establish the work of our hands.
Lovely.
How cool is that?
Very nice.
There it is. So that's interesting, isn't it? That's a song. That's a prayer of Moses, the man of God. There, Psalm chapter 90, and I think that's probably a good place to leave it. Shall we leave it there?
Absolutely, yeah. We have finished our Exodus.
And that is it? Have we set a record?
I think we probably have.
You know what? I reckon we've done this in under half an hour. Definitely a record. Thank you, Mr. Spiritual Babies of spiritualbabies.net.
That's good.
Next week, boys and girls, it's Vayikra. We're going to be in Leviticus. How about that? Until then, dear listeners, be blessed. Be set apart by the truth of our Father's word. Shalom.